Colonel Leighton, I want to turn to another big issue which became even bigger, I think, over the last few days, the civil war in Syria. It's been an awful conflict, obviously. 30,000 Syrians, said by the human rights groups there, to have died. Another 28,000 or so disappeared. But now we appear to be at that point which officials have warned about again and again, that this could very easily spread beyond the borders. A lot of violence over the weekend in Lebanon following that awful car bombing that killed one of the senior intelligence officials there, Wissam al-Hassan. How dangerous is it when you see this sort of sectarian violence taking hold in Lebanon now?
Oh, that's the biggest danger, Jonathan, that we have right now in terms of the Syrian conflagration. And there's so many risks. You know, obviously you had the Turkish issue with the Turks and the Syrians exchanging artillery shells across their border, and the shelling of the Turkish town of Akşakale. Those kinds of things become really important precursors to any of these tinderbox type situations. And with the Lebanese situation and the killing of the intelligence chief, that becomes a very, very serious element to look at, because the sectarian landscape in Lebanon is similar to that in Syria. You also have a situation where the Syrians have controlled Lebanon for so many years, and there's a natural tendency for the Syrians to want to continue to exert control over that country. And then, of course, you've got the players of Hezbollah, Hamas. All of those are in play in this particular case, and Lebanon becomes, in essence, the proxy war that could take place if we're not careful, and we want to be very careful that we don't let it spread to Lebanon if we can avoid that at all.
Colonel Shaeffer, a lot of alarm bells ring when you see this kind of violence in Lebanon. Oh, a lot of bad memories as well.
I agree with the Colonel's assessment, and I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that we have to walk a very fine line. We do not want to see the outcome we saw in Libya, where you destroy the central government, thereby destroying the very ability of the people to be cohesive and stay together. With that said, we can't allow al-Qaeda to go in and be part of the solution as well. This may be radical, Jonathan, but if I were Turkey, I would invoke Article 5. I would invade to about 25 miles, set up a safe zone.
Article 5 being Article 5 of the NATO Constitution, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Right. I would invoke that. It created a safe zone of about 25 miles, make that the safe haven for all the refugees to come to, create a government of Syria in absentia, where you actually have this a legitimate group of people that we can call the government in absentia, like during World War II, the French government in absentia in England, and then try to go from there. But the idea of simply, as John McCain has talked about, arming folks, I think we would see the same potential bad outcome we're seeing in Libya right now.
Right. Right. Lisa, I think a lot of our viewers will look at this and say, yeah, we've heard all about Syria. We know Syria is a big player in the Middle East. There's this smaller country next door, Lebanon. They're having some problems. They've had a civil war before. Why do we care? We do need to care what happens in Lebanon.
Yeah, well, of course we need to care. We have to care about every single country in the region, because they're all very vulnerable to all these forces hovering ahead. This is what we warned at the start of the Arab Spring with Egypt, and it's exactly how it played out. It played out sooner than we had even predicted it would play out, where these forces are hovering overhead. These political vacuums are being created, as the Colonel correctly pointed out. We don't know who we're arming. We don't know who we're supporting. We just say, okay, they're against these dictators of decades, so we have to help them. But exactly, you know, as everyone pointed out here, we have to be very careful, walk a very fine line, and be very cognizant of what's going on, whether it be in Lebanon or Syria or Libya. They're all vulnerable at this point.
And Colonel Leighton, I guess that if there's one group, well, the best poised to take advantage of any chaos zone in Lebanon, it's Hezbollah, and that could mean all sorts of things for Lebanon's neighbors, Israel, to the south.
Absolutely. Hezbollah is the most dangerous thing that Israel has to confront right now, and that becomes another reason why we have to tread not only very carefully with Lebanon, but also make it very clear that we understand what the geopolitical and power implications are of a situation like this. So it means that we go in and are proactive in Lebanon. I think we have missed a lot of great opportunities in Syria to contain the fighting. I think that you know, what Colonel Shaeffer mentioned about the idea of a buffer zone is probably something that we should seriously have considered considered a few months ago and is still possibly viable. But the other thing that we should also look at is the establishment of a no-fly zone, because now we see the Syrian government going after their civilian population using both fixed-wing and rotary-wing aircraft. And because of that, they have, in essence, upped the ante in terms of the suffering that the Syrian people are experiencing. And it really has to be a part of this as to be the humanitarian piece, and we need to look at that as well. And that is, if we work that carefully, then we can also foster a great deal more goodwill, and we're currently fostering in the Arab world.
Colonel Shaeffer, moving on to one of the other big issues, Afghanistan.
Right.
There doesn't appear to be a lot of light between the two candidates on Afghanistan. The withdrawal by the end of 2014, both seem roughly committed to that. So how does Governor Romney, if he should, in fact, should he, and how does he differentiate himself from President Obama on Afghanistan?
Well, there's 2 points, and one of them he's already stated. You never tell the adversary when you're leaving. I mean, I think President Obama's basic flaw in his strategy, there were several, but the most basic and most obvious was telling the Taliban when we're leaving. I mean, it's been obvious that they've been waiting us out and preparing, according to Ambassador, the ambassador just came out of there over the summer, Ambassador, oh my goodness, I'm having a terrible time with names this morning.
Ambassador Crocker.
Ambassador Crocker said that about 25% of the current Afghan military, to include the army and police, are Taliban infiltrators. That's the ambassador says that. And so we got to be concerned about that. The other point that I'd like to see Governor Romney make, it's never been about numbers. It's been about strategy and what you do with troops. A former Central Command commander, 4-star General told me a while back that the issue has always been, what is the mission, not how many troops are you using. So we got to focus on what is effective. We were effective in defeating the Taliban in 42 days because we were focused on actually going after the bad guys, only the counterterrorism. The Afghan people aren't ungoverned, they're self-governed. We need to go back to that, allowing these tribes to be self-sufficient. I don't think we can push them into a central government. And so I think Governor Romney acknowledging that and then working with the Pakistanis to basically go after the Taliban, who now, by the way, are turning on them. We just had the girl shot by the Taliban. Right. We need to help them out of the situation they helped create.
Yeah. How do we put pressure on Pakistan, Lisa? Is it just a financial thing? Do we talk about aid?
You know, we could have our enemies hating us for free. We're actually paying them to hate us. So it's like, here you go. But yeah, that's one issue. And another issue, you know, when we talked about Syria and you talk about Pakistan, it's everywhere. You know, when we talk about Afghanistan, our troops, there's fewer troops there now, but they're more at risk. You know, just a week, I don't know why more people didn't highlight this, just a week after Osama bin Laden's capture was announced, 19 troops were killed by the Taliban because we weren't looking. Right. We were patting ourselves on the back because we did such a wonderful job catching Osama bin Laden. And again, all of these different groups, these are proxies inside these different countries. These threats exist. It's inside Pakistan, it's inside Lebanon. I think another thing, if we want to look at Iran as the biggest global threat right now, that's another way to combat the regime. Inside Lebanon, Hezbollah is funded by the Iranian regime, or Syria, who's giving them the weapons, who's allowing Bashar al-Assad to remain the way that he has. It's the Iranian regime. So again, all the different threats, whether it be in Pakistan, we have to apply the pressure. We have to have a better strategy for Afghanistan.
Okay, let me just go round the panel quickly. Got to wrap it up. But Colonel Leighton, first of all, which of these many issues that we've discussed do you think will be and or should be the main focus of the debate tonight? What is the most pressing of these issues?
Well, I think clearly the Middle East is going to be the one that's going to come up. I think that when you look at all of the different aspects, you know, you've got the tinderbox of Libya and the catalyst of what happened to our ambassador there. You have the Iranian situation, you have Syria, makes for a natural discourse for the debate. The other side of this, though, is there are certain issues that are not really being looked at here, and that goes to the other part of the world. When you look at what's going on in the South China Sea and also between Japan and China, there's some significant issues that they should be talking about. I almost doubt that they will, but it would be nice to hear which candidate has which position regarding the efforts between China and Japan to fight over a bunch of rocks in the Pacific. The other part of it is that one thing that Governor Romney mentioned very briefly in the last debate is cybersecurity. This is going to be a very, very big issue for the nation and really for the world.
Yep.
And it would be very, very interesting to hear what the candidates have to say about it. There's been some progress made in recent years, but the problem that you have is every bank seems to be getting hacked with cyber issues, and you have HSBC doing it, being a victim of that, and you have other banks, of course, the 2 weeks prior to that.
All right.
So these are all issues with that, Jonathan.
Okay, we got to go real quick. Colonel Shaeffer, most important.
Modernization. We've got to figure out how to fight cyber, China, in addition to that, infrastructure, our power grid, all these things. And then I don't agree with Governor Romney simply restoring $2 billion. We need to do a 21st century strategy. Let's remember the last underpinnings of DOD that we created was 1947, the National Security Act of 1947, to win the Cold War. Cold War is over. Let's figure out how we can configure ourselves and be effective, not more expensive.
Interesting point. Lisa, what's the most important thing for them to talk about tonight?
I think the victor is going to be the person who's going to be the most honest and say not only are we in an economic crisis, but we're in a foreign policy crisis as well. Obviously, the Middle East, Libya, Iran being the biggest issue. And I think because the economy is such a big deal, how do we deal with China?
All right. Okay. Lisa Daftari, Colonel Shaeffer, Colonel Tony Shaeffer, author of Operation Dark Heart, Center for Advanced Defense Studies, and Colonel Cedric Leighton, U.S. Air Force retired president of Cedric Leighton Associates. Thank you all. Great debate. We will have a lot to talk about tomorrow, no doubt. Thanks all for being here.